Hi, my name's Pat. I'm one of the patisserie teachers, and this morning we're going to make chocolate mousse. I have my ingredients in front of me here. The first thing we need is our gelatin, and I've got my gelatin here, and I'm just going to soak this while I talk to you. So I've got a little bit of iced water here, and we're just going to place our gelatin leaves inside until they become nice and soft. Now, a mousse is a cold set dessert, and that's one of the reasons why we have the gelatin, because the gelatin is a setting agent. A mousse has a nice, light, fluffy texture, and we achieve that with our egg yolks and our caster sugar, which we're going to whip together over this double boiler here, and we're going to put this on the stove and just bring this water up to heat. And then once it comes to the boil, we're going to turn it down to around just below a simmer or a simmering point, and then we can start to whisk our egg yolks and sugar. It's important, if you weigh your egg yolks in advance, that you keep them refrigerated for a food safety point of view, and also that you keep them covered, because otherwise they dry out and they get a skin. So you can see here how I've got my Glad wrap touching the surface of my yolks. I'm using a fine caster sugar. Also, don't put the caster sugar in with the egg yolks too soon, because the sugar will draw the moisture out and the proteins come up into little lumps, and that's what we call burning the egg yolks. So I've got my ingredients here. I also have my chocolate and my butter. I've already started to melt it just so we can move along a little bit. It's a good idea, if you're going to prepare any moulds or anything like that, that you can pre-soak your gelatin and you can pre-melt your butter and chocolate. So that goes on a heat over here, and we're just going to get ourselves a nice smooth chocolate paste. We're going to stir this over a moderate heat while we get everything else organised, and make sure that the butter emulsifies into the chocolate and that it's not too hot. Also, you'll notice I'm using a metal spoon. I'm not using a wooden spoon, so you use metal or plastic so that you don't seize up the chocolate. Over here on my right, I have my cream. Now, I've pre-whipped my cream, and you can see my cream has a nice soft peak to it. It's a nice soft whipped cream. Because I have this cream out on the bench while I'm doing the demonstration, so it's for a reasonable period of time, I have it on some iced water to keep it nice and cold. So my cream is already whipped, my chocolate is melting, I have my gelatin is softening, and I can start my sabayon. So we need to remove the Glad wrap from the egg yolks, and our egg yolks and our sugar go onto the stove, and we're just going to whisk these together. Now we're using the heat from the stove top to help dissolve the sugar and to strengthen the egg yolks and to trap air into the mixture and to get what we call a sabayon. And this will take about 5 minutes. You should be able to look underneath, and we'll just turn that down because we don't really want to see the water boiling. It's very important that you do not get any egg yolks staying up the side of the bowl, that everything comes back into the centre, and that you continually whisk so that we get a nice even cooking process of the egg yolks. And this will take me just a couple of minutes. So I've been whisking my egg yolks and sugar over a low heat for a few minutes now, and you can see that it starts to get thick and glossy and form a ribbon, that it leaves an impression over itself, and that's very important. How long this takes you will depend on how well you control your heat and how much energy you put into this. What I'm going to do here is I can now take this off the heat, and I'm going to drain my gelatin. If you remember from the beginning of the video, my gelatin was quite firm. Now it's soft like plastic. I'm going to pop that over our heat while we take care of the rest of the mixture, because that will allow us to incorporate the gelatin easily. I have here some stock syrup and some Contro, and I'm just going to heat up this liquid, and I'm going to add it to my chocolate. If I was to fold this chocolate and butter mixture straight into my sabayon, it can seize up. So what's important is that we get some hot liquid, and this has just come to a simmer. And what we can see here, just move. If I add some syrup and Contro that I'm using here to flavour my chocolate, that it's going to form a nice glossy chocolate paste. Now, if you don't add enough hot water, it will become dull and grainy, and all that tells you is you need to add a little bit more. So if you have a look here, see how it can get a lot thicker than this, but see how it's a little bit thick and a little bit grainy. I need to add just a little bit more, just to adjust it nicely. This breaks down the chocolate, and the Contro, of course, gives it a nice flavour and makes it easy to incorporate into our Savion. So you can see it now looks a lot softer and shinier. If you find your chocolate and egg mix isn't quite elastic enough, we can always add a little bit more in. You can see here our gelatin started to melt. And what we're going to do now, we're going to fold together our chocolate and our Savion. So they can go straight in together, like so. Okay, so I've added my chocolate and my egg mixture together. I'm going to add a touch more syrup, like so, and we're just going to whisk that together and get ourselves a nice, smooth and glossy paste. What I need to think about now is incorporating my gelatin. So that can go straight in. And now we just need to get our temperature down to incorporate our cream. I'm just going to move over to the side here. So we have our chocolate mixture with our gelatin folded into our Savion. We're going to take 1/3 of our soft whipped cream, and you need to be quick here because you need to emulsify it very quickly without it setting. If it's going to get lumps in it, this is when it's going to happen. So you need to have a little bit of energy. I checked that my chocolate had come down to blood temperature, so around below 27 or abouts. And once we've got that nice and smooth, then we can relax a little bit more because we've got a nice emulsification happening here. I can take my remaining cream and I can just pour my chocolate mixture into there, and then we're just going to make sure that we fold it all together very nicely. Turn the bowl as you go. Make sure you bring up everything from the bottom and everything from around the sides, and you should get a smooth, glossy mixture. Just like that. So my bowl's nice and clean. Take the glass a little bit off the top. And we're done. And that's our chocolate mousse. Now we're going to place that into a mould, and that will require time to set in the freezer for the chocolate and the gelatin to set. So I've got myself a disposable piping bag with a plain tube. I've got myself some stock syrup here with a little bit of Contro for my sponge, and I've got my moulds. Now you can use moulds such as these, or you can pop some into a takeaway container and pipe it. This will be quite nice and neat for what we need today. To fill our piping bag, twist, push in, so that you can see that nothing's going to come out the end. Fold it over your hand. And then fill it about 1/3. This mousse is currently at an ideal temperature for filling cakes, for making either small or large gâteaux, because it's going to run nicely into the mould and set level. Seal up your piping bag, bring over your moulds, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to place a little bit of mousse into the bottom of each mould. just like so, not too much. Then what we need, our stock syrup. And I'll spin this around so I can access the sponge. And our sponge, we're just going to dip our sponge and place a little disc in the centre. Just like so. So you can be very quick. You can see I've already pre-cut my sponge and I've already pre-made my syrup before we started. That's that taken care of. And then we come back and we're just going to fill these to the surface. And because this mould this mousse is still soft, we can actually give it a slight tap and it will fill to level. And I'm just going to fill the rest of these and then pop them into the fridge. So we've filled our moulds. Now because this is a cold set dessert, it's going to go into the cool room and we're going to let it set for a couple of hours until it's firm to touch. You can see from my remaining mousse that it's a nice, smooth, glossy mixture. It holds a nice ribbon and will have a nice fine texture. It's important that you balance the amount of chocolate and gelatin that you have in your mixture so that it's not too firm and not too soft. So if you were to serve this into a glass and you don't need it to stand free like these moulds will later on, you can take a leaf of gelatin out of this mixture so it's a little bit softer on the palate. Also you need to adjust those ratios depending on the temperature, so the warmer the area you're serving it into, the slightly firmer it needs to be. Watch your temperature when you put together your chocolate and your egg yolks and your gelatin, that before you fold in your cream that the temperature comes down to just below blood temperature so that you don't split your cream and lose your emulsion. They're the main points you have to be aware of. And of course, when you're filling moulds, work neatly and cleanly. So I'm now going to pop this into the fridge. So our mousse have been in the freezer for a couple of hours and they're set to touch. And we're just going to use some non-melting cocoa powder. And we're just going to dust just lightly over the top. We don't need to cover the whole amount. Just a light dusting is fine. So you can see there, that's what I want to achieve. Then we're going to demould them. So we're just going to take our frame. Now we do have the plugs here, but it looks like we don't need them. So if we just pop them off like so and remove them. If you have some that are a bit stubborn, then what we can do is we can just take them up into the plugs here, very carefully, line up, and away we go. And just remove them as well. Even lost the acetate on one. Now to have a look at our finished product, we just gently peel the acetate off, and that's our finished dessert. And what we can do, we can plate that. Now you'll notice that there is a seam, a join there. And if you're the customer, it always goes away from the customer, and we'll just pop a nice little chocolate decoration on top like so, and that's finished. So I've got a couple more plates here. I can just plate these up very quickly. So again, just remove the acetate. If you left these in the freezer for another hour or a little bit longer, then what would happen is that you get a cleaner edge on the outside of our cake, but that's okay. So we're just going to pop a little apple chip into that one. And that. And that's that. That's our mousse. Now you can use your mousse in a variety of ways. Today I've chosen just to make them as an individual gâteau for a plated dessert. But that wraps up how to make a chocolate mousse.